So the idea today is we're going to be showing some of, I don't say disadvantages, but some of the places where we can get in trouble when we're using Apex, and where are these situations that normally gets us there, like what leads us to actually end up in trouble. We're gonna look at a few of these, then we're gonna concentrate on how to be fixing these, how to be finding these. We're gonna talk a little bit of about security tools. If we're gonna have time, we're gonna touch on processes from like developer perspective as well, and stuff like that. So quite a few bits and pieces to cover, right? So for the intro, I only have one slide, and all I want to do is just warm us up. So pretty much bullet point number 3 is like 90, like more than 90, I'm going to call that, of breaches are due to human error, right? So my point is that we are still humans, right? Even though we develop wonderful and applications with no bugs whatsoever, right? Ideal ones. We still do make errors, and today we're going to be learning to accept that we do make them, and we're going to learn how to find them and hopefully fix it before they show up on production systems, right? And half of these attacks, when they do happen, they're not even detected. So probably as long as it take a hacker to get into your system easily as we don't detect it, that it even happened, right? So it's a combination of the two. And pretty much I'm going to just focus on the fourth one, just to comment a little bit. I believe it's that time that where we as developers of the systems, it doesn't matter web or backend ones, take responsibility for the code that we write. So that also applies to security, right? There's many ways how we can talk, and what we can talk about when we talk about security of applications. There's of course database side, data layer. We can talk about middle tier security and stuff, and we can talk about development side, like application front end thing. And most of my presentation today will be concentrating on that, us as a developer think, like how do we improve that side of the story, right? First thing that we're gonna hear when we talk, or when we hear someone talking about security, is injections, right? So the idea is we are trying as an attacker to introduce a piece of text or a command or something that's going to be executed by engine, not, or seen as an engine, not as input data, but more as an action. So it's, instead of database of giving you no data found or query returning no rows, we actually get rows from other table as well instead of what we expected. So kind of things like that. There's so literally Apex is not like the only one who has issues with it. Of course, any web application, this is the same thing that applies to all of them. And pretty much, if you just look at the URL, or if you remember yourself about the syntax, how Apex handles the URLs and how it's presented to us, how many times did we just try to change that ID from, I don't know, 10 to 20 or something along these lines? And I'm sure that the end users have similar ideas as well. And they don't need any skills, right, to do that. And pretty much, we are lucky because Apex comes with all these built features built into the product, right? So almost, if we would leave it down to Apex would almost always produce like a I don't say bug-free, but it would be secure code as possibly can be. But then we as developers come in, and then that's where the trouble starts. So we introduce that vulnerabilities in there, right? And most things when we talk security, we have to consider that we are unfortunately not consistent. So we work on app, we come back to that app in 20 days or in 2 months or in 1 year, we're going to find lots of things that should be have done better. And the other bit is probably next time when I come around, I'm going to be quite surprised what I was able to write before, and I would say, who the heck did write this code, right? And that applies to security as well. Sometimes I'm going to be rushing, sometimes I won't. Sometimes the project needs to be finished on time, so we kind of lack attention and we do silly stuff, and it's very easy to sort of forget where things need to be and what settings we need to set. What features does Apex kind of offer us? Of course, Apex URL, I already mentioned it. authentication authorizations that we can apply throughout our applications, security settings on multiple levels, session handling that we all take for granted, session state protection for our items and pages that we can't sort of that we can protect them, like APIs, many versions like JavaScript side and PL SQL side as well. Of course, it integrates with some of these tools that we are familiar with that we're going to be chatting about, like Apex Advisor or external tools as well. And pretty much, I want you just to remember at the end of the session, no matter what I showed you or whatever, or no matter what we talk about, and we had a presentation at Kscope, right? And then we had a colleague or a person from the community coming to me after 2 days, said, for 2 nights I couldn't sleep. And I'm like, but that was completely opposite of what we were trying to do. We were trying to give you information, not to scare you guys. It's not about scaring you. It's about providing you confidence that you know that what you're doing is safe, right? That's what we're doing today. And let's look at so we know Apex gives us possibilities to inject HTML, right? So when we talk about injecting stuff, that's one of the places where potentially we could end up in trouble. But let's take the basics first. For example, URL tampering. That's the most obvious one and most easily prevented one. You would be surprised how often we leave these things behind us completely open to anyone sort of playing with these IDs and changing the links, right? Access control inconsistency, right? That's another beauty. For some reason, we know that, so we, of course, we can control and we can apply authorizations to multiple and many components in Apex, such buttons, regions, processes, application processes, application items, and so forth, dynamic action and whatnot, anything, items, regions, you name it, we can do it on all of it. But the trouble is, if we miss one in this chain, that means all of the other stuff that we did, or 99% of the other things that we've done, are pretty much went to the drain if we find that one vulnerability or one inconsistency of yours. So, for example, typical example where things left completely wide open our application items. So we protect our processes, we protect buttons on the pages, we protect pages, but for some unknown reason, application items are completely wide open. And if you query your apps for this situation of application items, you'll see that most of your apps won't handle for that. Another thing is very sometimes confusing with Apex items. So with each release, we get more and more of these available options that we can go with. Is it a text field that's a display only? Is it a display only type? Is it a hidden type? Is it whatever? And very often people get confused what settings are actually going along with some of these items. And what I want to mention with item is that we're going to go into details later on, is that not all items are the same. So that's the only thing for starters that I'll say on items. And then, of course, like JavaScript submitting a page, which is a common sense one, or unprotected application processes or items. So let me, before I get out, I have to get out of it. I'm hoping you guys can see my my screen. So I'm going to do a first 1 or 2 demos. So pretty much, I have, let me go the hardest one here. So let's do first on number 2. That's easiest. Okay, so what do I have here? So I have an application process, okay, on my application. So I'll show you that you see that I'm not making it up. So I have an application process, and it's just a dummy process, and it does very cool business logic where it just displays hello to you all or something along these lines. And as someone who's been working with Apex, I always say this is just a standard URL. So if I don't protect my item, like application item or application process, just by using a link, which most people don't understand and don't realize that it's also possible. So I know that I can send an input to my URL. So I say application process, and I just give it the name of the process. And if I click that, you'll see that my process actually executed. because it's not protected, or maybe it should be protected, or maybe it shouldn't have. But people are not aware that easily as just running a URL, I'm able to execute these things. So I can sort of play around with your processes depending on what they're doing. And this one, just for starters, to sort of keep us going, is that one. So there's little bits and pieces to it. So we have, there's an application. Let me go application item. So there's an application item, user role that by default is being set to admin. So when I log in, it's set to admin. And if I show you my session state here, if I say application items, it should be in there somewhere. Yep, and it should be equal to admin. So all good. And then I was giving a task. Can I hide this region based on authorization? Okay, so if I'm admin, I should see it. If I'm not admin, I should not see it. Let's do it like that. So what I've done is, so I created an item, perfect. I went in, I created an authorization. Perfect, so I'm gonna explore that one. Is protected with flow, so you can obviously see that there's something wrong with it. So all I'm saying here as a demo example is, if I'm admin, then you show me true, which means give me my region. Otherwise, return false for all other users, which would be all other except for my one. I should not get that region shown. But again, I'm coming again to that URL. So if I don't protect my item in this case, so application item again, I can hit it just directly using URL. So you'll see here that if I click on the link, I lost my region, which means I was able to change the value of application item, which means I was able to break my authorization scheme, which means I was also able to break the business logic on the page, just simple as using URL. So I didn't have to have it here. I could have write all of it just here directly in my URL on top. And things like that, like inconsistency with buttons, inconsistency with items, they're easily exploitable, just as you've seen me playing with these demos at this point. Where else can we normally see things that go wrong is for cross-site scripting. This is all about to do with cross-site scripting. So what's a cross-site scripting? Cross-site scripting is us or someone trying to inject JavaScript code into our application. And what happens is then if the attack is successful, pretty much browser is going to execute the JavaScript, and pretty much all wonders can happen after that. From you being presented with a fake screens, or someone asking you for some serious or confirmation details, or some other stuff, or you name it, all is possible, right? Typical where cross-site scripting shows up on Apex and reports. So when we go fancy about displaying our columns, making some cool things in there, doing some changes, like even in HTML expression or column links or list of values as well. And a few other ones that I'm going to show you today, depending on how much time we're going to have, is also with HTTP.p and substitution variable in JavaScript. Let me go out of here, and I want to just jump quickly into cross-site scripting for a second, just for a few examples. So I love this thing. Like the idea behind the demo number one is, at some point on a page, an item is going to be set with some value, and then when that value is whatever, like let's say it's equal to lead now, or it gets set to something, it just gets populated that it's not null. We want to display a message, and the display message is just alerting that the value has been set, or something along these lines. Hello, user, or something along these lines. That it does not matter. And what I want to show today is how easy we can abuse. So I've just left this so I can enter the field. Okay, so I can enter. If I submit, so it goes into session state, and if I alert, you can see that I got that value just shown to me. So that was the kind of the ask. But due to the flaw in the implementation, if I provide something along these lines, which is just silly as, so I'm just trying to provide some text, Then I'm going to provide some other commands for JavaScript, and let's see what happens now if I submit and try to alert on that one. So if I alert here, you'll see that straight up you can see that good day there did not, it did not just include good day there, it included also the window open blah 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 google.com, where here directly I don't see that at all. So obviously something is happening and something is, if I click OK, you'll see that I've been taken to some other systems or some other pages or whatnot. I could have done anything I wanted at that point. And this does not depend on what type of the field you have. It can be disabled only, it can be anything, as long as I have it in session state, for example, I can sort of mess with it. Let me show you how implementation was done and why that is wrong. Because I wanted to touch on the simplest one, and then so I have a button, I have 2 buttons, and I have a item that I'm providing, and then the alert one has a dynamic action, and then in dynamic action, let me just do it like this. This is how it was implemented. The person XY decided to implement the alert, and it's been in the application since forever, and it's been just copied and pasted across many applications that we found, and literally easy as this, I can immediately start to abuse this. So if you're using ampersand item dot syntax, like substitution variable syntax, be careful with it and make sure you escape it. What does that mean? So we can probably talk about 4 different ways, and I believe there is Apex items items dot p item value. So pretty much there's 4 different ways how we can do the same thing as like a developer tried before. So if I wanted to do exact copy but the secure version of it, I would do it like that. So notice how I'm using exclamation JavaScript here to make sure that that the field is safely escaped before it's getting before it's being used. That's one. Or maybe it was just a mistake how it was written. Maybe I just want to alert on the item that's on the page, which is literally coming from a browser. If someone changes it or something along these lines, I can read the value not from a session state like this one will do. This one will do it directly from whatever I see on the screen. And all of these versions, all of these 3 versions at the bottom, including the one that I just removed, so all 4 of these will do a good job, and they will do pretty much automatic. So these 3 do automatic escaping for you. Just easy as that, and as silly as that, you can just get in trouble by 1 command like alert. And I'll go one more for cross-site scripting, just because of I want to be cautious of the time. And let me do, for example, the LOV, right? So I'm going to edit. So I have a report, and it's nothing but show me some columns from my table, okay? And then just let me undo the fixes, so you'll see what I mean in a sec. There you go. So that's one thing, and the other one thing is that. So what has happened to me in one of the systems is so I had a report. So let me just refresh it so you guys can see it. Yes, yes, that's fine. Like that. Let's do it like that first. Then it doesn't show up. Okay. So I had a table, and I had like a code shown to me or to the users, and our ask that came to me was, can I replace the code with some, because the new table was created where I could match the code to be a person's full name, like first name, last name and stuff. So I just wanted to make a column like Charlie or something that was like a code. I wanted to translate that into a real person's name. So of course we all know how to do it, right? So I went in, I updated my plain text field to be a plain text based on the value, right? So that was one ask. And of course, since it's based on the value, I provided a query that's giving me an LOV list, okay? But what I did not pay attention to is before I even came in, this field on the report was turned off. And I've noticed that all over people's applications, for some reason, even though we don't have to do anything with HTML or do anything fancy along these lines, these fields get for some reason turned off by developers, like IDs, like numbers and stuff. We turn these things off. So don't turn that thing off. And I did not spot it in my change. And I'll show you. So I have to give you a little bit more details. So imagine that this thing is not here. And that's what happened to us. So for a long time, data was clean, data was okay, data was fine. And then at some point, after I done the change, someone managed to put this into the values of my LOV query. Easy as somewhere it was possible for the users to enter it, and that's how we ended up in there. And because I did not notice, so just keep in mind that now this bit did not pop up, okay? But because I did not notice my setting that it was turned off, if I save that and rerun the page, you'll see what's going to happen. Exploitable LOV. So if I click OK, you'll see that my Bob here does not have scripts anymore, does not have tags for JavaScript. So if I don't notice, and I did not pick it up that this was turned off, immediately I open a flood that if at some point my first name get infected by bad data, which I did not have control over, I was in trouble. So fix is easy as I can apply, I can always keep this on, but you've seen that I can get bitten by, if I don't notice this by accident, this goes off. So how would we normally, so we can do two things. We can protect it with that one, or we can do Apex escape .html function to be applied on the firstness so that it escapes. I'm hoping that's going to be a valid syntax. Just let me check if it's going to complain. Yep, all good. And then you'll see that this would be equally, regardless of what I have here, that would work. So if I start now, you'll see that I don't have issue anymore with that one, just because I know that my LOV list or my query can be infected. So how many of you and of us actually do this on the LOVs? So I would almost take that from now on, I would write this always like this, no matter what you do with the other one. Just be cautious that if we apply this one and the other one, we're pretty much doing a double escaping. So what does that result as? You'll see in a second. So it was escaped once with that HTML, and then it was escaped once more by Apex. So this is the result of it. Both of them are safe, but obviously this looks a little bit more ugly, right? So because it's double escape. Let me go back to presentation. So this is roughly what I have for cross-site scripting. Just two examples for you to see how easy it is to get in. And then SQL injection, right? So this is another SQL injection sits well with us. Why does it sit well? Because we are the SQL guys, PL SQL guys, developers, like Oracle developers. And then we can kind of understand what that actually means. Where in cross-site scripting, we're talking about JavaScript, and many of us say, what, where, how? It's really hard for us to understand cross-site scripting side. Where SQL injection, we can understand because it's literally we're abusing our SQL. Let's hop out again. Let me quickly show a few of my lovely examples that I have. I won't do the obvious one. Let me do the prepare URL for you. So just bear with me. I have to edit the page like this. Just let me undo some of these things because they are related one to another. There you go. Click condition.
All looks good so far, Lino. The only requests we've had come in were that we, of course, provide the presentation, which we do as video form, and make the application here available as download.
So we'll try to do both, but we can discuss that later on today. All good. So I'm ready to show you the demo. So what we are doing is just a silly example, abusing prepare URL. So it's Apex API that I can simply abuse. There's quite a few of APIs in Apex that can go wrong if we don't respect what it's supposed to do. But one of them is prepare URL, right? What do I mean by it? So you see how I have a field here, this is just an input field. And the idea for developers and for this problem was, as the field changes, we want dynamically to generate a URL that's going to be stored in some hidden item, and then that URL is eventually going to be called and used somewhere in some JavaScript or some navigational branching and whatnot. So if I submit this value, so if I say submit, you'll see that nothing fancy will happen. I only get this URL result, which how my URL is going to be looking like using my prepare URL function. So let me show you what happens in here as a definition for that field. There's nothing much, and probably none of us would spot the problem, right? So this is what I have in here. I'm referencing substitution Apex variables. I'm another one, page ID, session ID, app ID, and in the same shape and form, I'm referencing a page item of page 12 message, which is the one that I'm typing in. So I'm typing in something, and all I want is that it regenerates my URL. That's the idea. But what if I tell you that so the beauty with SQL, so this one will probably break my page, but let me try. Beauty with SQL injection is try your fields with single quotes. And if you give back your users or errors, as you can see here, I have a giant or error here. That means that I'm already halfway there. What do I mean by it? Yes, so I have to restart the page. Let me just go one page back. So I need to reset my value, otherwise the page is completely broken. There you go, cross-site scripting, and I'm on a page, I'm on a SQL injection. There you go, and we're looking at the prepare URL. So you've seen, as soon as I type in single quotes and I get or errors, that means I already have potential for why is that? We'll touch on later in terms of why is that important that we hide these messages from databases. It's clear as day with SQL injection, right? So if you give me information that I want, I know how to exploit them because I'm a SQL guy after all. Let's try with something like this. What if I try that? So all I'm trying to do, so if you imagine that prepare URL function that I have under, right, that's hidden behind my screen, all I have to figure out is what's going to happen if here come the wrong values. So I need to provide the value. I can close this single bracket and I can close the command. So that's exactly what happens here. I'm providing a value. I'm closing a command. Oh, I don't want to pull because it's going to mess it up. And I'm closing that HTTP or util prepare URL function. And then I just add another one, which is just a random database procedure or function that I have available. So what's going to happen if I submit that? So you may say, oh, nothing happened. Well, if you notice at the top, it actually printed that out, which means at this point I'm able to run any SQL stuff that I want, anything I want. I can even go for data, so I can get the data out, let's say for a department here where the department is greater than 20. If I submit that, you'll see here that I happily get all of the data that I want. Easy as that, just if you do that in the wrong way. And pretty much how do we fix it is just in this example, we would use a bind variable, okay? So that would be easy as. And let me go back to the slides because I want to be on time with you guys. Where these can happen? For example, the cursors, if you do dynamic cursors, if you do execute immediate, of course, HTTP.P is problem in both SQL injection and cross-site scripting. So just remember that. And again, if you're using substitution variables in SQL, you're going to be in trouble, or most likely you're going to be in trouble. So why I kind of understand, and so Apex team gave us ability to inject HTML almost everywhere where we ask them to. For example, perfect example is I have a report and a form, and this is just a list of my employees. If I open edit link of King for the form, I want to see a region title to say editing King. So I want to see that in a region title. Of course, they made substitution variables for us available across the app, but be careful where you use them. So I'll give you two funny examples. If you use your substitution variables in, let's say, in interactive report header, so I want to put this to be a value of my header in my report. So currently I only have one, and if I submit the value, you'll see what's going to happen. So it's going to start executing my JavaScript. So that means that you see that I provided more than what I see as a title, but it shows that title is prone to be exploited with cross-site scripting. Easy as that. And I'll show you one more, which is I can mention it, which is breadcrumb. So I challenge you to create a page, and for page name to provide this. And if you just use a wizard, create page and provide that, you'll see what's going to happen. I won't go into details, but that's just a funny example of how easy it is to find places in Apex where we just need to pay a little bit more attention to it, right? I am all good. That one. So that was the end of SQL injection and demos in that sense. So we're coming now to Apex settings. So we're trying now.
Lino,
yeah, go ahead.
Could I just add something?
Yeah, of course.
I think as far as prepare URL, I think it's better now to use the Apex page get URL, because I don't think that is so. I think it's a lot safer to use that than prepare URL. It's just I just wanted to mention there is another way of doing it.
No, I agree, Gary. In a sense, I know that lots of other people nowadays are preferring that one over the prepare URL, and I completely get why, right? So I'm not going to say one is better than the other one, but in prepare URL, it was just to showcase how easily you can get in trouble, right? Nothing more than that, right? That was kind of the intention.
Okay, great, Lino.
But thanks, Gary. So now we're concentrating on the side of story. How do we stop of this happening, right? So there's application settings. So I have this ugly picture here that I always use. I don't know why, but I kind of, it stuck with me. So there's settings on many levels, like instance, workspace, application, page, item, and then we can go further down to buttons, processes. Each of this level has some sort of settings. So I try to sort of list them here for you guys, like instance versus application versus page versus item levels. Some of these are overwriting each other. So you define one on instance, then you can define one on application, and then the same one you can do on the page as well for some of them. For typical one that we always have that we're not aware is session state protection, right? And when we talk about instance settings, there's about 100 settings, and there is available APIs that allow us, if we have the privileges, that we can, from our SQL code, we can change the values and be setting these sessions, right? Or setting these settings, not sessions, but settings. Instance level, for example, just randomly restrict access by API or set workplace cookies or disable administrator logins and stuff like that. It's irrelevant. I just want you guys to know there's roughly 100 of the settings, just in case. And the API that we can use is, so there's a view and there's API. So Apex views where everything is listed in terms of what's being currently set is Apex _ instance _ parameters. And the other one that actually there's a get and set method in it is Apex _ instance _ admin. But just you need to have a special privileges in order to run that, of course, otherwise everyone could be messing around with your settings, which you don't want to necessarily, right? Then we're talking about application settings, application level. So we all went to application builder, we open our share components. Under there, we could find some security sections. We could find some descriptions of our application attributes and stuff like that. Sometimes it's easier, so I'll show you one that's almost impossible to miss. And if you go into your application now, and if you analyze them, I'm sure you're going to find at least one that does not cater for that one. So if we go under security, blindly just guessing, is that one. Authorization scheme. So let's say I have 50 pages in my app, and if I miss one of these pages to protect it, I am literally, all of my app is in trouble, right? So this was kind of to cater for us who forget things or who are inconsistent. Is if we apply, let's say, at least must not be protected, or some of the authorization scheme I have available, immediately this gets applied across all of my pages. So in case I forgot of course I can I can exclude my public pages, which is just exclude or not, but this would then protect all of my other pages, so they are not by default exposed to problems. So what does that mean? If this is applied, so authorization is true, I would be able to access the page. Otherwise, I would be forbidden to see that page. Out of the box, on applicable all of the pages. And this is, I don't say when it came in, probably with version 18 or even maybe before then, but people still did not start to use this, or maybe they have, but on some apps you have it, on some other apps you don't have it. So it's about consistency. So check your apps that they have that setting, just roughly as easily as that, right? Bear with me, just hopping onto slides again. And pretty much the most important ones is the session state protection. I don't know if you picked up there was on Apex World, there was a link to a great blog post by John Dixon, right? So I recommend the read, where he is talking about, literally it was from yesterday, which was just convenient for me to share with you guys. Protect Apex URLs with session state protection. If you read in details, what it is about is literally trying to make sure that no one can mess with your items and values in there, and pretty much I love the conclusion. So each section has the conclusion. It says recommendation, enable application session protection always, and then each section has recommendation, never set to unrestricted, which I'm sure that most of the apps that you guys have are unrestricted just by accident, not that you did something wrong. It's just how Apex does it by default. And page items, a recommendation is put it to checksum, even though if you don't know if you don't know why, just leave it as checksum, not the other way around. Not leave it open because you don't know what to do with it, and stuff like that. So it's a really great read. So I just wanted to derail for a second, and then pretty much we come down to a page setting. Most important one is page access protection, which is combined with application session state protection. You need to have it on all levels. If you turn it off on application levels, everything that you've done down the line goes to waste, right? Because it's already missing and broken. And similarly, so I won't go into too many details of it. I just want to show it here, and pretty much why session state protection is pretty much prevents that URL tampering that we started with, or that I showed you example with. So if you don't want your items to change values, you need to protect it, and pretty much session state protection is one of the first things you jump to, right? And Apex items. So this is the lowest level where I'm going to go to, and it's about understanding, right? So there's different types of items, and it's not easy for people who are new to Apex to actually understand when and why and which of these settings it needs to be applied when we want to do one item versus the other. So just let me go back to my presentation. Let me find one page and let me find one item. So you'll see how easy it is in terms of this. So let me find one item. Okay. So every Apex item has some properties as we know it, and we can do here. So text field can have a disabled property in here. See what does that mean? And also there's a send on submit or not. So if it's a disabled, sometimes I don't want to send it to be submitted, right? That's one of the settings. And then the rest normally for standard items sits with security. So if I scroll all the way down, there is a security section. So this one, and I'll filter it out so I can show you guys what it is. So every single field will have this security, and it's same for all items. Let's start from the top. So I can apply authorization. That's obvious as. So I can either see or show the item according to what authorization you fulfill. The next one is session state protection, and this is what John is also on the blog post that I showed you. He's saying if you don't know what to do with it, don't do unrestricted. Just put anything. He's mentioning checksum required. I will probably say you can do restricted maybe as a minimum. But most people and most fields that we have in the apps are always unrestricted, okay, by default. Ask yourself a question. Does my item contain anything that I should not see? What does that mean? Apex holds all of the values as a text strings, right, in the database. If I have a naughty database guys, and if they're feeling bad on that day, they could read all of these securities. Let's say I have social security numbers, passports numbers, anything that's important to you, like addresses, emails, whatever. If you think no one should be accessing it, you can turn that setting on. Easy as that, and then Apex is encrypting this for us so that no one can get that value out except for Apex, right? And then the last one is restricted characters. So please be aware that you can restrict characters. I always say we give up on 50% of security, and I'll tell you what I mean. When a new project comes, when you get the project documentation or requirements, you go and ask your project manager what type of things you're going to be entering in these fields. And most commonly, like in 99.9%, you're going to get the answer, let us do everything. But what does that actually mean? So if you don't secure your inputs and your data that goes in a database, pretty much then you're just dealing with consequences after that. So you are preparing your apps for what can happen when your data is bad. But what I'm saying is we should pay more attention that data does not get bad. So we don't want tags in our databases, in our columns, in our values, and we can tell the user, you're trying to do something wrong, please correct it. Similar to emails. If you type something that's not an email, it's okay to tell people that's not bloody an email. It does not fulfill our expected format or a phone number or anything along these lines. You don't want bad data to go in. If you let it, you already opened 50% of the doors for bad things to happen. And this thing can help you kind of narrow down what people can enter. So if I don't want these brackets, like greater than, less than brackets, I can simply apply that to my items. And I will be happily that no one can write anything that contains these two, which means probably I can't have cross-site scripting in there because no one can put that in. A page wouldn't run, Apex would give me an error, and I would be a happy chap. And then the only difference now between standard fields, which are these, there is a hidden field. Hidden field has one extra, which is value protected. So this one plus security makes all the history that we need to learn in order to sort of be good with items and to prevent. So some people think if I make it hidden that my job is done. But they don't realize that even hidden items, if they're not protected well, and you can see here, by default, this is unprotected. All of them, so except for the one that I said, all of them would be left as default, which means sessions stay protected by default is unrestricted. Not good. Or you have to ask yourself a question. Is it okay that at some point someone changes this value without me actually wanting that to happen? If the answer is no, well, you need to think about the setting. That's as short and as easy as it gets. But you need to know when and where or when can you do it. You can't apply that one if JavaScript is changing your value. If JavaScript on the page is doing something, this needs to stay turned off. Okay, that's just a small hint. Going back to my slides. Sensitive, I did the whole purpose. So why do we have items on the page, and why we here as developers is to protect them, not to change if they didn't need to change. What that means is if a hidden item needs to say hidden and not changed, we need to bloody make sure that it does not change the value during the run of that page or something that the user is doing. And just I always say, not all items are the same. So some items I don't care if they change because they're not used, they're not saved. I'm just using it for page. Some others, maybe I care about that. Application items, again, I wanna, so if you go and create one application items, you'll see that Apex does not escape it by default, okay? So there's a little checkbox that you can do, escape values. I would probably restrict the item that it can't be set from a browser, and the other one would be that it escaped as well. Editable items of pages, so items that are sent between the pages, we need to consider the session state protection, because we don't want, so the beauty with Apex is URL can change all of these values, even application items, hidden items, you name it, any item that's not protected, I can change it just using a URL. As you've seen it, I've demonstrated it, right? These are just summary of thoughts that I have. I won't go reading and sort of go through each of them. They're here for the reference. I want to concentrate on further down the line. Like display items is one that messes your mind up. Like you want to have a display only item, but that can have two outcomes. You can just have an item, like a textual value on a page that can't be changed, one option. And the other option is you may want to present some sort of HTML thing that should not be changing and be updatable. So you can make a disable item, but also to show HTML. And that version is the one that's scary and dangerous. Others you can live with. And again, display items value can change. So just make sure that you protect it in the same fashion and form. Like, and that's about it. Item tips, never trust user inputs. No matter what you have in that item, escape it before you use it. Easy as that. If you apply that simple policy, your apps are going to be 100% safe. I love this restricted characters. Probably Apex would, I would love that we have a little bit more options in there. I don't know what I'm going to be asking there, but normally double quotes and some of these single double quotes and these characters are needed for some company names or something along these lines. So it's always, we need to open it up. And I would love that we can have some menu way of saying, I want this one, but I don't want that one, or something along these lines. Anyway, and these are the tips how you would generally go and secure your items, right? Apex URL, don't forget. So if you have 50 pages, 100 pages, thousands of pages, or just two, if one of them you miss out on protecting properly, all of the other ones are compromised, because Apex has ability, which is great, and also it's bad for us who don't get it, is if I come to that unprotected page, from there, I am like in command room and I can just dump anything on any page on any item that I want at that stage, just because you let me in easily on that one. So just remember, even though I can't go directly to the pages, I can still use some other page and go behind the screen to all of them and setting these values, and just make sure that tempering is not allowed, so that changing anything is not allowed. That's the whole point. That's error handling function, a must. So I can't emphasize that. Again, if you go quickly, I won't just leave, I don't want to save. If you go on this, I believe it's under either security, one sec, security, and no, of course it's under definition. So there is a place where I can define my error handling function. There it is. And most of the cases, people still don't have error handling function. And you've seen, I mean, I can show you, did I close my, no, I didn't. SQL injection, I'll show you one, just any example. Let's try that one. Single quote, input, look what's gonna happen. Look at my error. Or again, quoted string not properly terminated. It's giving me instructions how I can break my code, my own code, because I'm a query guy. I know what means query is not properly terminated, like string. I just add another string. Oh, I need to find where it is, but I just need to add another bloody string. And if I don't get this, which means I have a nicely error handling function, I would never have a clue what happened there. Even though if there's a huge issue security thing, if you display, oops, something happened, I would be happy because I would not have a clue what's going on underneath as someone who is attacking your system. So that's the message for error handling function. We can define one, and we don't want to expose all errors to the users, and it improves overall user experience. 3 reasons why you should have it in your apps. How do we protect Ajax calls? That's pretty much the next one that comes along. Let me hop out. I have prepared for you guys. Just let me check that it still refreshes. All good. So I have to open that one. So I have a report, and the ask was, how do I delete an employee? Of course, I implemented the button, and there's some functionality. Let me just pick one that I won't be sorry for deleting. Do you want to proceed? I can click OK, and it will delete the row. How do we do this? So it's not about how, but I want to concentrate on the part of how I actually implemented it. So there is a dynamic action that's being called, okay, which is a custom one. And then it asks me, do I want to continue? That's that bit. And then this is the code that does the Ajax part. So some people don't like Ajax. They don't know what it is, but it's pretty much JavaScript or browser going directly and talking and executing your PL SQL procedures or functions or something with database. So with the browser or through the browser, we talk to the database. We send something to database to execute, and then we return the results back if we want to. There's different versions. But Apex server process does that. So how do I stop users of actually, so how do I stop someone who is not allowed to come to this point? Previous versions of Apex only allow us to secure dynamic action on the top level here. So there is a client-side condition. I don't know if I can highlight it. I can click it here so you see it expanding on that side. And there's a server-side condition. We had that for a long time, and it was pretty much straight as we had dynamic action. But it took us a little bit to get granular access on that level, like a true action level. So each of these can be protected. And there's so if I look at here, there's a client side again, there's server side, which is similar to before, and also I have an authorization scheme. If so, all three together with the one on the top should combine, make these things run safely. Okay, if we apply it, if we need to do anything fancy later on, like after that point, we need to handle it in our process. So we need to, in the process, I can say, this is a user, this is an action. Is he allowed to do that? Something along these lines, but you have to implement it. There's no one box ticks it all and you're safe. So that's short as I have for Apex. Ajax calls, where do you go for help? We are, let's say, 2 minutes away. There's security tools. Apex Advisor, some of you heard, no one uses it. Patrick, I'm sorry, but from the experience, people have, I don't know why they're not liking it or using it, but we have to improve on this one. I don't know what. I wish that people have it as part of the development process, right? That you still run this for your pages. Apex Sec, a professional tool, but you have to pay a license. If you want to chat about it, we're happy because we are happy to consult on that one for you as well and provide any details you want. I won't go into details, but the point is, I have it running here, and I can show you guys how that looks, just for the sake of demoing. This is so I analyze one app, and it's showing me the results. So it gives me the percentage how happy my app is, 83%. And these purple lines are the groups of the problems. So I have access control problem, authorization inconsistency, configuration, cross-site scripting. And all then it comes down to is like drilling down through these items one by one and sort of checking out what's wrong. For example, if I click here, it's going to tell me that page one does not have a page protection on it. And then I go update the page, come here, reevaluate and change all of these settings, and then eventually you end up on if I go summary report, eventually you want to have this on 100%. Apex team uses Apex Sec. That's all I'm going to say. So probably the best tool we have currently on the market. Some people heard about Apex Sec. There is not yet publicly available version, but people have changed Apex Sec from or open source that was available to us, and they adapted it for 19, 20, 21, and 22 versions. Get in touch if you're interested. I'm happy to sort of share some thoughts on it. But what I want to focus on for the last 2 minutes is how much can we do ourselves? Okay, pretty much we can do everything. We can monitor and log our applications. There's two views. I'll just quickly mention it: Apex Workspace log and activity, like access log and activity log. You want to know who is hitting your apps. Apex stores this for you. All you have to do is put it into your own local tables, because every 2 weeks you're going to lose the data. So you want to pick up the data, put it in your table, pick up the data, put it in your table, and then you can analyze. Apex views. So what do you learn when you use Apex Sec and Apex Set with time? You learn that they both rely on Apex views, or most of these checks that they do Apex views. So I listed some of them for you. So who here would not be able to find an application page button that does not have authorization, or page process that does not have authorization, or application page that does not have authorization, and so forth? There is so many views. All there is to little bit play with them, find or learn what you're after, and find where it's sitting. And I've listed most important ones here, and I also listed what are things that you're looking for in these views and that you can easily find. And let me just go through it, because for the sake of time. And pretty much the last one is, when you deploy your application into production, make sure that it does not have a debug mode on, and then it's a run application only. What does that mean? Last one before we wrap it up, Dave, is when I go export, before I go into production, in test and the other systems, it's not. So there's two things: run application only and debugging off. Make sure that you deploy it like this in your production system. Going back to my last slides, and using views, I just want to show you this. Easily you can create your own app. So this is an app that uses Apex views, and I'm able to securely to literally sort, let's say, 90% of all issues I have in my application. You'll see my one that I used in my demo, and I can analyze it for all and anything that I can imagine. Just it's about buttons with no authorization, processes, pages, item protection, regions with no authorization, interactive grid processes that don't have, and so forth. Literally, you name it, you'll find it in the views. And going back to the slides, for the last section is processes, embedded code. Just make sure that you're aware that it exists. Application, utilities, embedded code. Apex lists all code that's in your app, JavaScript or PL SQL in there. So you can easily find all of these appearances of ampersand, item dot syntax in there, or anything like execute immediate or anything along these lines in there. And my message is, yes, we can almost do it ourselves. So you would do 90% or 95% using views, and then you add a security tool, Apex Sec or Apex Set, depending on the choice, and literally your app gets you 100% that. Summary, I am happy to skip it, because just to be aware of time, you guys have it for the reference, all of it that we talked about, some escaping methods and functions that are available to us.
If you liked this video, please like it and subscribe to our channel.